When my son was about 12 years old, my wife and I decided to separate. It was a difficult time because she had been involved in an extramarital affair and had decided to marry her partner from that relationship. What made things even harder was that she chose not to take our son with her, even though he was deeply attached to her. Since the separation, I've been the sole caretaker of our son, striving to provide him with the best life possible under the circumstances. I've always been there for him, attending every school event, helping with homework, and supporting his interests. However, despite my efforts, he struggled to bond with me as strongly as he had with his mom. Sometimes, he even expressed resentment towards me for the separation, accusing me of being the reason his mom left. He felt I hadn't been able to take care of his mom, implying that somehow I drove her away. These moments were tough, but I understood they stemmed from his pain and confusion over the situation at such a young age, so I tried not to take his words to heart. As my son grew older and started considering his future, he expressed a desire to attend one of the most prestigious and expensive colleges. This presented a significant challenge for us. Running a small business, my income was modest, and while it allowed us to live a comfortable, though basic, lifestyle, funding an expensive college education was beyond my financial reach. I had to sit down with my son and explain the financial constraints we were facing. I suggested alternative colleges that were more affordable but still offered excellent programs. I encouraged him to apply for scholarships and consider community college for 2 years as a way to reduce costs. Throughout these conversations, I made sure to emphasize that my inability to afford his dream college didn't diminish my pride in his achievements or my commitment to his future. These discussions were not easy. My son was understandably disappointed, and it seemed to exacerbate the old wounds from our family's past troubles. He occasionally withdrew, spending more time alone or with friends, and our communication became strained. Despite these challenges, I continued to support him in every way I could, hoping that with time, he would understand the reasons behind the decisions we had to make and see that I was acting in his best interest, driven by love and not by any desire to limit his potential. It was a heavy blow to realize that even after sacrificing so much to ensure my son could have the education he dreamed of, he was reluctant to help when I was in need. I had sold our small plot of land, a piece of property that could have been a financial safety net, to finance his college education. My hope was that this investment in his future would pay off for him, and it did. He secured a well-paying job, which filled me with immense pride as a father. However, the same success didn't seem to inspire a willingness in him to support the business that had underpinned our family's livelihood. When my business began to falter, I reached out to him, hoping he might offer financial support, or at least some solid advice on getting it back on its feet. His response, that he didn't want to invest in what he saw as a failing venture, stung deeply. It wasn't just the refusal that hurt, but the dismissive way he viewed the work that had supported us for years. Reluctantly, I followed his suggestion to take out a bank loan to revive my business, clinging to the hope that with a little boost, things might turn around. But despite my best efforts, the business didn't recover. The market had changed too much, and the strategies that once worked were no longer effective. Now, with the added weight of bank debt, bankruptcy loomed as a real and terrifying possibility. I found myself in a dire situation, burdened by debt and feeling abandoned in my time of greatest need. It was a painful realization that despite the sacrifices made, my relationship with my son had its limits. He had his life and career to think about, and it seemed there was little room left for the struggles of the man who had once done everything to support him. Now, facing financial ruin, I had to consider all options. Selling the house might be the only way out, a heart-wrenching prospect as it was more than just a building. It was the home where memories of better times lingered. Yet, survival was paramount, and tough decisions lay ahead. The journey through parenthood had taught me much about unconditional love and the pains of letting go, but this new challenge would test every ounce of resilience I had left. He agreed immediately, showing me the kindness I desperately needed. He said I could start by helping manage some of the rental properties he owned, offering me a way to rebuild my life from the ground up. It wasn't easy stepping into a new role after everything that had happened, but the routine work and my friend's supportive environment began to mend the pieces of my shattered life. Each day at work, I learned more about real estate, how to manage properties, deal with tenants, and even the ins and outs of buying and selling. This experience gave me a new sense of purpose and a hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. My friend and I would spend evenings talking about life, our past, and planning for future business ventures. It was during these talks that I realized how much I had isolated myself in my previous life, focusing only on my business and my son. Meanwhile, I tried to keep searching for my son. I sent emails, left voicemails, and reached out through any mutual contacts that might know his whereabouts. Despite these efforts, there was no response. The silence was painful, but my friend reminded me that sometimes giving someone space is the only way forward. He advised me to focus on rebuilding and finding happiness in my new life, even without my son's presence. As months turned into a year, I slowly regained financial stability and even started saving a little. My friend suggested I think about buying a small property. Nothing big, just a modest house where I could restart my personal life independently. It was a daunting thought, but also an exhilarating one. I hadn't imagined being in a position to own a home again so soon after my financial ruin. The journey wasn't just about financial recovery, but also about emotional healing. Working in real estate, reconnecting with old friends, and even meeting new people in the community gave me a renewed sense of belonging and purpose. I learned that resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about finding a way to thrive, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Though the estrangement from my son remained a painful chapter, I began to accept that I might never fully close that gap. Instead, I focused on the relationships I had now, the work that fulfilled me, and a future that was slowly but surely looking brighter. My friend's unwavering support reminded me that family isn't just about blood, it's also about the people who stand by you when you're at your lowest. And for that, I was profoundly grateful. My friend's advice and support had been a catalyst for this incredible transformation. He not only gave me a job when I was in dire need, but also mentored me as I learned the ropes of the real estate world. His belief in me was unshakable, even when I doubted myself. And his encouragement to start my own agency was what pushed me to take those first crucial steps towards rebuilding my life. As my agency grew, I expanded into the hospitality industry, opening small cafes that quickly became popular spots in the city. These ventures not only broadened my business portfolio, but also brought new challenges and opportunities for growth. I learned about different aspects of business management, from customer service to supply chain logistics, and each new learning made me a better businessman. Owning properties and managing cafes taught me a lot about the community and the market's needs. I made it a point to engage with the community, sponsoring local events and supporting other small businesses. This approach helped build a strong local network and a loyal customer base. My personal life also saw significant changes. The huge house I built in the posh area of the city became a symbol of my success and stability, but it was more than just a lavish dwelling. It was a home where friends and family were always welcome, a place of warmth and generosity, mirroring the kindness my friend had shown me. Despite the business success and material wealth, the estrangement from my son always lingered in the back of my mind. I hoped that one day he would see the life I had built and perhaps understand the reasons behind the decisions I had made. I kept the door open for him, hoping that he would walk through it someday and that we could reconcile and rebuild our relationship. In the meantime, I focused on giving back to the community that had embraced me during my toughest times. I set up scholarships for students in the city, funded local sports teams, and contributed to various charitable causes. These efforts brought me a sense of fulfillment that money couldn't buy. Through it all, my friend remained my closest confidant and biggest supporter. Our friendship had grown stronger over the years, and I knew that without his initial help and ongoing guidance, none of this would have been possible. Looking back, I realized that life had come full circle from the depths of despair to the heights of success, all thanks to the unyielding support of a true friend and the resilience to keep moving forward, no matter what challenges lay in the way. Seeing my son trying to reconnect after all these years brought up a mix of emotions. The hurt from our past dealings and his abrupt departure was still a tender wound in my heart. His sudden praise on social media, coming out of nowhere, felt too strategic to be genuine. I suspected that his interest was piqued by the visible improvements in my life, showcased subtly through my posts and the interactions on social media. When he reached out, wanting to meet and discuss important things, I couldn't help but feel skeptical about his motives. His response to my challenge, accusing me of being mean, felt like an attempt to guilt trip me into opening up my life to him again. The relationship we once had was not simply strained, it had been severed by his actions and choices. I made it clear to him that if he continued to press this issue without respecting my boundaries, I would consider involving legal authorities to protect my peace. It was a tough stance to take, especially against my own son, but years of rebuilding my life from scratch had taught me the importance of guarding my well-being against potential disruptions. Despite the stern warnings I gave him, part of me was troubled by the thought of completely shutting him out. There's always a part of a parent's heart that aches for reconciliation and healing in a fractured relationship. However, the journey I had undertaken to salvage my dignity and establish a new life demanded careful consideration of who I allowed back into my personal space. The situation left me pondering the complexities of familial bonds, forgiveness, and the right to personal growth away from the shadows of past relationships. As I navigated these thoughts, I remained cautious, prepared to defend the serene life I had fought so hard to create. Update 1. My son called me. Hearing him talk like that took me back to all the difficult moments we had been through. His sense of entitlement really hadn't changed. It stunned me how he glossed over the sacrifices I made, treating them as mere parental duties that didn't warrant any gratitude or acknowledgement. His callous remark about me not being able to do anything useful with my business when I was struggling was particularly painful. It was as if my efforts and the subsequent downfall meant nothing to him. I couldn't help but respond with a bit of irony. So, let me get this straight, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You bail on me when I'm on the verge of bankruptcy, vanish without a trace when I'm practically homeless, and now you call me up, expecting warmth and a welcome mat because you're feeling guilty? He paused, probably not expecting this confrontation. Dad, I know I messed up, but you're my father. We're supposed to be family no matter what. That's exactly it, son, I told him. Family supports each other no matter what. When I needed you, where were you? You decided to move on and leave me to fend for myself. Family ties don't make demands. They're built on mutual respect and support, which you didn't show. He seemed to struggle for words, finally saying, I know I was wrong. That's why I'm calling. I want to make things right. I took a deep breath. Making things right isn't just about saying sorry when it's convenient for you. It's about understanding and making amends. You decided to step back into my life now that I'm well off again. Do you think that's fair? He was silent for a moment. What can I do to make it up to you? He asked earnestly, or at least it sounded earnest. I pondered his question. For starters, respect my boundaries. We can start talking, maybe meet up once in a while. But I need to see real change in your attitude towards family and responsibility. It's not just about financial support. It's about being there for each other emotionally. Can you do that? His reply was cautious, but willing. Yes, I can try. I really want to fix this. I agreed to start slow with some calls and possibly a meeting in the near future. Rebuilding our relationship was going to take time, and while I was open to giving him a chance, I knew it had to be on healthier terms than before. It's tough to see this pattern where he only reaches out when it seems like I might have something to offer him. I spent many nights wondering if he'd ever reach out just because he missed me or wanted to know how I was doing, not because of what I could provide. And now, with him planning a visit after learning of my success, I can't help but feel skeptical about his motives. Despite my doubts, part of me wants to believe there's a genuine desire for reconciliation on his part, not just financial interest, so I decided to set some boundaries and conditions for his visit. I thought it might be wise to communicate clearly what my expectations are, to avoid any misunderstandings or false hopes. Firstly, I made a mental note to make it clear to him that our relationship needs to be built on more than just financial support. It should be about genuine care and interest in each other's lives. I want to see real effort from his side to mend our relationship, not just superficial gestures. Secondly, I plan to discuss how we can move forward in a way that's respectful and considerate of both our feelings. It's important to me that he understands that while I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, it can't go back to how it was before. There needs to be a new foundation based on mutual respect and understanding. Lastly, I decided that if he really insists on visiting, I'll set the tone by arranging a neutral place for our meeting, like a coffee shop. This would give us both some common ground without the pressure of a more personal space like my home. It would also be a test to see if he's willing to respect the boundaries I'm setting. These steps felt necessary to protect myself emotionally and financially. It's not about holding grudges. It's about ensuring that if we're going to reconnect, it's healthy and genuine. I'm hopeful but cautious, ready to open the door a little but prepared to close it if old patterns reemerge. Update 2. Hey, so here's the scoop on the latest with my son. A few weeks back, my son finally decided to visit me. When he got here, he was super excited, like he was seeing a long-lost treasure or something. He couldn't stop looking around my place, telling me over and over how proud he was of me. He said it was amazing that I started from the bottom and now I'm here, with a big house and a successful life. I explained to him that it wasn't just me. I had a lot of help from a good friend who stood by me when everyone else turned their backs. We spent that evening catching up, had dinner, and then he crashed in the guest room. The next day, he was all about hanging out with me, so he tagged along to my office. For the whole week he was here, he stuck by my side like glue, going everywhere I went. But then, just before he was set to leave, He got all serious and said there was something he needed to talk about but hadn't been brave enough to bring it up. He finally spit it out. He wanted to know what my plans were for my will, mentioning how I wasn't getting any younger and all the work I still had on my plate. I saw right through that, though. I told him straight up that he shouldn't worry about my will, that it's my business, and he's not entitled to anything just by showing up after so long. I made it clear that him hanging around hoping to get something out of me wasn't going to work. He packed up and left the next day, and I really hope he understood the message I was trying to send. Update 3. I'm here with an update. So, my son really isn't letting up on his plan. He recently reached out to me with a new request. This time he wanted to send his kids over to my place for their summer vacation. His reasoning? He was too caught up with work to take them on a vacation himself. He spun this story about how it would be good for them to spend time with their granddad, especially since they'd never really met me before. I hesitated because honestly it sounded like a huge responsibility. I'm busy with work after all and wouldn't be around all the time. But my son seemed to have thought of everything already. He planned for his wife to come along with the kids and stay at my place, and he mentioned he'd drop by to visit now and then. A week later, there they were, my grandkids and their mom, all settled into my house for the entire summer. Part of me was really happy to have them. There's something about having family around that fills the house with a different kind of energy. But another part of me couldn't shake off the feeling that my son was using this situation to tug at my heartstrings, maybe hoping to sway me about the whole inheritance issue by playing the family card. As the days went by, it became clearer that while I enjoyed the company of my grandkids, I had to stay alert to my son's underlying motives. It wasn't just about giving the kids a vacation. It felt a lot like he was positioning them as pawns in his game to soften me up. As summer progressed, my son's visits became more frequent, about every couple of weeks, and he'd stay for a day or two each time. During one of these visits, he opened up about his financial worries. He shared his concerns about not earning enough to give his kids the kind of life he hoped for, and he mentioned that his current job wasn't going well because the company was struggling. I listened, but I made it clear that as a parent, dealing with such challenges is part of the job. We all go through tough times raising kids. Interestingly, my son also had a conversation with my friend, the one who helped me rebuild my life. He confessed to my friend that he felt I still hadn't forgiven him for the past, despite his efforts to make amends and reunite our family. He seemed genuinely regretful about his past actions and expressed a desire to repair our relationship, but I was hesitant. My friend relayed all this to me, repeating each detail of what my son had said. This put me in a reflective mood. On one hand, I could see my son making an effort, showing some vulnerability by sharing his financial anxieties and his desire for reconciliation. On the other hand, I was cautious. His past actions had left a deep impact, and while forgiveness is powerful, it isn't easily given without genuine change and understanding. I decided to take some time to think about how I wanted to proceed. It was clear that my son wanted to bridge the gap between us, but I needed to be sure that any steps toward reconciliation were based on mutual respect and genuine understanding, not just financial needs or fleeting guilt. As summer drew to a close, I contemplated these complexities, weighing the joy of bonding with my grandchildren against the history and tensions with their father. Dealing with the fallout from such a confrontation was tough. After my son and his family left, the house felt quieter and, in some ways, emptier. The stern words and the decision to cut ties had been necessary from my perspective, given the circumstances and the past betrayals, but they weighed heavily on me. I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sorrow as I walked through the rooms where my grandchildren had played just days before. In the following days, I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had transpired. I questioned whether I had been too harsh, or if I had simply been protecting myself from further hurt. The silence from my son was a stark reminder of the divide between us, a chasm that seemed to widen with each passing day. I kept busy with work and spent more evenings than usual with my friend, the one who had helped me rebuild my life. He listened as I talked through my feelings and doubts, offering advice when he could, but mostly just providing a supportive ear. Despite his previous conversation with my son, he respected my decision and understood the complex emotions involved. The decision to potentially never see my son again was not made lightly, and it carried a burden I wasn't sure I was fully prepared to handle. However, I knew that boundaries were necessary for my own mental well-being. I was determined to maintain a peaceful life, one that I had fought hard to establish after years of upheaval. As autumn approached and the memory of the summer's conflict lingered, I found solace in my daily routines and in planning for the future, a future I hoped would be free of such turmoil. Despite the pain, I felt a certain peace in knowing that I had stood up for myself, even if it meant making difficult and painful decisions about family relationships. Now for the top comments. NTA, this was literally what you were supposed to do. So there is nothing to be embarrassed about. Your son deserved this reaction and has to deal with it. Kudos to your motivation and hard work, because it is not easy to establish when one had already failed terribly. A lot of willpower and resolution are needed to succeed like that. Also, your friend's support was commendable. NTAOPs is a shameless and worthless a-hole who has no self-respect and probably has lost his memory. He was the most horrible son. A man could have made his dad sell his plot for the degree when he could have achieved a scholarship if he was that determined to go to that college, then left his dad when he needed him the most. And now he's back to discuss his dad's will. Bullshit. Shit. Story 2. So before I talk about the dilemma, let me talk about my background. I'm a 24-year-old guy. I grew up living in group homes. If you don't know what a group home is, it's basically a smaller orphanage. Living in a group home was rough. We generally weren't guaranteed meals, and we said literally everything. So if we got new clothes, we had 10 other kids fighting over it. If we got pizza, we had 10 kids fighting over it. When I was 11, I became close with this kid from school. He invited me over to his house for a couple of sleepovers, and his parents would notice how much I was eating. I would completely pig out despite being relatively skinny. There were a couple of other things they noticed about how I behaved. That was very weird. They realized I was probably being on the fed and decided to take action. Eventually, they took me and I never looked back. So today I'm 24 and I'm working a nice desk job. I'm generally happy and I'm still close with my adoptive parents. My bio parents reached out 2 weeks ago and were relieved when I responded. We ended up setting up a meeting yesterday. I was already quite hesitant to meet them, but only did because my mom and dad said it could be worthwhile. So we sat down and talked over lunch. They told me they gave me up because they didn't want to be parents. They were in their mid-20s and married. The only reason they gave me up was because they weren't ready for parenthood. After this, I pretty much gave up on being civil and I started making snide comments like, "Oh, so I was ready for group homes." I was being pretty rude and my bio mom was fighting tears. After they told me I have a brother, I said, "Oh, okay. So you were ready enough to be a parent but weren't ready enough to check on your son." I had paid enough and left. I was very angry and told my adoptive mom what happened. She said I should go easy on them since it probably took a lot to reach out and apologize. She went on and on about how she'll support me no matter what, but she thinks I'm acting a bit harsh. My bio parents called and asked if we could meet them again and talk more. My mom thinks that it could be beneficial now that my initial emotion's out there. If I think I was acting like an angel and my mom thinks I'm acting like an angel, I probably am. And I hope idea. I'm meeting them again this Friday. This time my mom is coming with me. I let them hear my perspective and now I'm going to do my best to listen and hear them out. I think my mom being there will make it a lot easier. She's a calming presence, and I'd hate to see me lose my temper. Also, a couple of people suggested developing a relationship with my half-brother, and I'm vehemently against that for a couple of personal reasons. Now for the top comment. NTA, I'm an adoptive mom too, and I would guess your mom is worried that you're burning bridges when you might realize that you want or need. Do you have all of your medical history to connect with your bio family later in life? That's your call, though. You're an adult, and your feelings, whatever they are valid. You absolutely don't owe your bio family a relationship. If you haven't, though, you might want to consider seeing an adoption and trauma-informed therapist because you don't deserve to carry around the burden of pain and anger. And 2, they literally failed as humans. They dumped you into the system for convenience. I would be outraged. There are lots of very genuine reasons to give children up for adoption, and I respect those that make that decision for the right reasons. What did they expect? Your response was spot on. They decided a baby was ready for a group home. I'm so glad that my family chose you and loved you and clearly still do. Keep working hard and make sure to have an absolutely wonderful life. Story 3. I have 3 kids, twins, 23 male and female, 11. Stephen and John, 17. John was the result of me cheating on Ella and Stephen's father, Rob, with John's father, Harry. Harry ran away after he found out I was pregnant. Rob found out about the affair 3 years later. The kids were still young, so we didn't tell them the truth about why we divorced at the time. Rob still loved John and cared for him, which surprises me, considering John isn't his biological son. Harry came back into contact with me when John was 10, and although I was a little bitter, I eventually forgave him and we fell in love and got married. They didn't dislike Harry, but they weren't close with him, which in John's case hurt Harry, since he is John's real father. It became bad when John was 16. Harry wanted to do something with John, but John said no. Harry snapped and said that they never spent time as father and son, which caused John to say, "Look, I don't hate you anything, but I don't see you as my dad. So stop trying to force me to see you as him. I have a dad and he's not you. I couldn't take it anymore." And I asked John if he would be saying that if Harry was really his father. John looked confused, and it was then that I told him the truth, and that his behavior was hurting Harry. That caused John to cry, and he ran to his room. Ella went to comfort him, and Stephen glared at me and said, "I hope you're happy you broke that poor kid because of your butt-hurt feelings. It's been a year since then, and I think my kids forgave me, but still aren't close with Harry. Recently it was Harry's birthday, and he wanted me and John to spend it with him." John, however, decided that he wanted to watch a movie with his friend. I told him that Harry wants to spend time with him. He said he's going away anyway, and I'm free to ground him when he gets back. When John got back, I told him that his behavior towards Harry is horrible. He told me that he's nice to Harry, but that Rob is his dad. I asked, "What's the point of me telling him the truth if he was just going to be like this?" He snapped. "Don't act like you told me the truth for my sake. You told me the truth out of spite and jealousy, because I wouldn't see your affair partner as my dad. And to be frank, I still don't. So your little plan didn't work," and he went to his room. My older kids got wind of what happened, and they called to berate me and told me to stop pushing John to love Harry. I told him that I get that John loves Rob. Harry is his blood father. Ella told me I'm wrong, that Rob is the one who raised John there. Therefore, Rob is his father. Stephen said he's going to rescue his brother the minute he turns 18, which is in a few weeks. I tried to get Rob to talk to John, but he said he wasn't forcing his son to love Harry. I just don't understand. Am I really wrong for wanting my son to love his blood father? Ada read it. Now for the top comment. "What a shitty mother and person you are. I hate to break it to you, but Rob is John's father. He raised him. How do you expect your kid to want anything to do with the man who broke up their family? I'm surprised they even speak to you frankly. YTA."